Do, do. Do, do.
I gave somebody an earworm.
You did. You gave me an earworm. Hello, everyone. We are here to record the live podcast of This Week in Science, and we're glad that you are joining us. All of the bleeps and the blurps and the bloops are happening here. They may be edited out for the podcast version, so remember, you can always subscribe to the audio podcast to get the nicely, neatly edited version of this program. Or you can have fun with us here. Good to see you all in the chat room. Oh my goodness, our 2 chat rooms, three chat rooms, and yeah, all the places. Wonderful to see you there, all your names. Thanks for joining us. Hey team, are we ready to go?
I'm ready. Born ready.
Almost.
Armrest.
Yeah, I gotta do a thing. I gotta try to do a thing that relieves some lag.
Oh, okay. Justin's having internet.
Should have done it
lag.
beforehand.
It's okay.
Justin has to find his science stories. That's what's happening. He's like, hold on, guys. I just got to do some quick research.
This is one of the bleeps and the blurps and the bloops.
And by that, I mean the things I'm supposed to talk about.
I had those in a long time ago.
What are we doing here?
I had them in before you, Blair.
Well, that's
Didn't
because
you
I did my
notice?
research last night and there wasn't a run sheet yet. So I had them saved as tabs.
Everything's under control. I just need to write it.
Kiki, how dare you? That's rude. Boop. Might as well mute
What
me.
just happened?
She keeps covering me up.
Boop. I twist you. Here.
Oh
I'm
no.
going to put twists on Justin's head over there.
There we go.
Boop. Are we ready for the show now, Justin? Have you
I think so.
worked on your lag?
Yeah, I think everything's under control. Just be like a bad lip sync.
I mean, if you like old school Hong Kong action cinema, just get comfortable with tonight's show. Okay, so we are going to start this show in a 3, a 2. This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 780, recorded on Wednesday, July 1st, 2020. Science, we're halfway there. Oh,
Whoa!
living on a science. Right. I'm Dr. Kiki, and today we will fill your head with stress response, giant penguins, and flying snakes. But first,
Disclaimer. Just when you thought it was safe to gather in public again, you remembered that we're in the midst of a growing pandemic that has claimed the lives of over 500,000 humans this year, and we're only halfway in. And so you put on your mask, you socially distance yourself as much as possible. Yes, we all want things to go back to normal, but like any problem, simply ignoring it seldom results in the problem just going away. Things have been tough. They're going to get tougher. Political will, the eagerness of businesses to reboot, and the willingness of workers who are in need of income to go back to work will not change the reality of the situation and cannot alter the course of events to come. And while we can eventually look at this as a stress test of our healthcare systems, our economies, our trust that our politicians can handle a crisis, the more immediate requirements to survive the situation will come from science, which is always finding new ways to fill our heads, our futures, and our fortunes with This Week in Science coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this
good science to you, Kiki and Blair.
And a good science to you too, Justin and Blair, and everyone out there. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Science. We are back again, as we love to do, to talk about the science with you. Oh, look at me rhyming there. And yeah, it's July 1st. It's halfway through the year. Can you believe it? This is like the longest
No, it's March
year.
14th. Yeah,
It's like the longest, shortest year ever. I am so confused by the flow of time right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know, I've heard that we need novelty to make us experience things faster. So maybe this constant flux of information and fear is what's keeping us going right
you
now.
mean the giant spike in cases. That's to spice things up a bit.
Yeah, so spicy.
Yeah.
So spicy. Oh,
Yeah.
dear. But we'll be talking about that in just a moment during our COVID update. Tonight on the show, I have stories about COVID. I've also got stress and brain eating.
Those seem related somehow.
I think they might be. Yes. Justin, what stories did you bring?
That's a great question. Can I get back to you? No. I have, for some reason, I have a lot of Australia, a lot of Australia stories, and New Zealand, and maybe a good reason not to recycle.
What? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for that one. We'll get to that in a bit. Blair, what's in the animal corner?
Oh, I have some birds that know their relatives just by the way they sound. I have some flying snakes. And then I have a couple of quick stories about jellyfish and penguins.
Okay, jellyfish and penguins. There we go. As we get into the show, I want to remind you that if you're not yet subscribed to This Week in Science as a podcast, you can find us all places the podcasts are found. Spotify? No, Spotify. Spotify, Spreaker, Pandora, Radio.com, TuneIn, iTunes, or Apple, whatever it likes to call itself these days. Google's podcast portal, all the places. Look for This Week in Science. You can also look for us on YouTube and Facebook. And you can go directly to our website, TWIS.org. Now, we are going to start off the show a little bit differently than we normally do. We're going to start it off with the quick news stories instead of ending the show with the quick news stories because, you know, we got to keep it fresh around here. So let's jump in to the quick stories for today. Is there a new flu? Oh, it looks like maybe there might be discovered.
Not allowed. Stop.
Just stop. Stop already. Don't even go there. Sorry, Blair. You're like putting the band hammer on this story before we even get into
what's
it.
going on right now? There could be a new flu. Get out of it.
Get out.
Get out of it.
Yeah, discovered by a project looking for viruses with pandemic potential in China. A new swine flu strain called the G4 variant of the H1N1 influenza virus is circulating in pigs that researchers think has the traits that will allow it to jump between humans and infect airway epithelia. Antibodies against G4 viruses were found in 10% of farm workers tested, suggesting that infection can and has occurred already. But whether or not it's going to turn into a bigger issue for us to worry about is still unknown. It's early stages yet, folks. We don't know a lot about it. Some of the big issues with this bird flu are that it contains aspects of the avian flu that our human immune system is not immune to. Additionally, it has another component that is avian, swine, and human all mixed together. It's very fun. So it could be something. It has components that are similar to the 2009 swine flu outbreak that was an issue, but not as big as COVID is now. Yeah. But don't worry about it. Just, we don't have to worry about it yet. Just wear your masks, social distance, wash your hands. You're all good.
Yeah, maybe we can kill it before it even becomes a big thing by just isolating ourselves properly.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, if we just maintain this proper sanitation and social isolation or distancing, it has less of a chance. So maybe being in the midst of a pandemic is a good thing at the moment. Justin, what was your next
Maybe.
story? Maybe.
This is in plus one. A underwater civilization has been discovered of Aborigines living underwater, but some 7,000, 8,000 years ago.
When water
yeah.
was lower.
Oh yeah, no, that's probably right.
That was my
a bigger
next
story.
question too.
I thought this was a bigger story. Yeah. This is Flinders University. They've published in Plus One. They have found 269 artifacts at depths as deeper as 2.5 meters below current sea level. They've got them between 7,000 and 8,500 years old. And it's one of those things that I've always pushed for is the need to do more of this underwater archaeology, because so much of where humanity lives is always by the sea. And so much of our history is currently underwater. What was very encouraging, I think, about this find was they were finding a lot of stone tools that they are in better condition than ones they typically find on land. They have not been weathered. They have not been in freshwater areas that are getting tumbled or beaten by wind. They go down to the bottom and they're heavy enough, they don't go down to the bottom. They were already at the bottom. But
then they got buried in sediment.
They got covered.
Yeah.
No, and then in this particular shelf area, there's not a whole lot of sediment that's covered. Which is, they determined that's part of the affect of this place is there's corals there. And it's not that the corals are protecting anything, but the corals don't do well in areas where there's a lot of sediment. So the fact that there are these corals there sort of illustrated the fact that there's probably not a lot of sediment deposit that was going on in this area, which is why the tools were sort of easier to find, because they were pretty much on the surface of the bottom of the shelf.
Yeah.
What was also interesting is they found some sort of divergence. Like there's definitely similarities to some finds that they've had in terms of the tool manufacture, and also some very different. So this was, you can see that this was some different tool use. It was larger tools than they would find later or even concurrently on land in different areas, but very well preserved at the bottom of the sea, not disturbed heavily as they would be on land. So that's very encouraging
awesome
news for a lot of underwater archaeology, which is those sites might really be intact. They might be under sand. They might be under silt, but they might be in really, really good condition down there. So,
yeah, depending on where they are. I mean, you don't want stuff that's been tumbled in the surf for a really long time, because that would definitely be weathered.
Yes, tumbled in the surf
watered.
would not sound like a good thing. Yeah.
No,
but
there'd be a lot of erosion.
But if it is in a place that did get covered rather quickly, it may not have been disturbed further beyond that. And sometimes those conditions are great. In northern areas, we found like wooden boats and nets. There are these wooden nets that were used to catch fish that were pretty ancient in northern territories and cold waters that were very well preserved because they were cold and they weren't disturbed. This is like fjords in Norway, I think, is where they found the fishing nets still intact down there. Yeah.
That's very cool stuff. I mean, someday that's going to be Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Probably someday soon. All right, Blair, what's your story next?
Giant penguins, but in North America. So there were penguins in New Zealand about 62 million years ago that were 1.6 meters tall. So like, what is that?
5'2".
5 feet. Yeah. So we know about them, but new recent discovery has found between 37 and 34 million years ago, so quite a bit younger, these much similar, but in fact larger penguin-like things. So like penguins, they had flipper-like wings to swim through the sea, but they, unlike penguins, became extinct around 25 million years ago. They're called plotopterids. They were up to 2 meters tall. So pretty large.
Yes.
And the really interesting thing here is that they had similar beaks with slit-like nostrils. They had similar chest and shoulder bones. They had similar wings, like I mentioned. And so they think they were strong swimmers. They use the wings to propel through the water, unlike other seabirds that use their feet. And they think that they also, based on this beak and everything, ate underwater too. They use that quick underwater swimming ability to feed underwater. So this is a huge source of convergent evolution.
Yeah.
They look
So
like
I also
penguins,
got-
swam like penguins,
But they're
and ate
not
like
penguins.
but they are not penguins.
No
so-
penguins.
Yes. So they even say that they think that they would have looked almost exactly like penguins. Like, it would have been hard for biologists to tell them apart, except for their location. But they were, of course, more closely related to North American birds like boobies, gannets, and cormorants.
Oh, yeah.
Plotopterids.
So, but they were swimming. They were giant swimmers, not necessarily good flyers.
Giant swimmers.
Right. And
Good
but
swimmers.
I think they also talk
The
about this was
cormorant-ish.
these are diving birds that over time, spent more time on the dive. The ones who stayed down longer and swam a little bit better probably caught a few more fish, and then that trait maybe then starts to take off. So it sort of illustrates too the sort of convergent way that penguins may have developed, because I don't think we know how penguins became penguins.
Right.
But
So
if we
that's
see-
a great point. They actually have a theory based on this.
Yes.
And that is that they think both penguins and plotopterids had flying ancestors.
Plotopterids.
Yes, that would plunge
divers.
from the air into the water, just like pelicans and gannets and
Cormorants.
cormorants. And that they would, over time, the ones that use their wings, kind of like you're saying, Justin, would get a little bit extra boost, would get the food faster or something like that. And so they think that they got better at swimming and worse at flying step by step over the years. And so this is just a massive change that you can see in convergent evolution, completely separated by time. So we don't think this is like any sort of drift or migration mistake or anything. The fact that they're separated by millions of years means this is definitely just a coincidence. Something effective.
And
That's great.
And also, to add to that would be if you become good, even if you're still doing the diving thing, but you have a nice fish source right there, so you're not traveling that far in search of food. You're staying close to where the fish are. You're hanging out on a rock by the ocean and not going much further than that. And so the necessity of all that energy of flight gets reduced, and you want to focus more on swimming. And at some point, the bird just gives up on learning how to swim or how to fly, because they just can dive right in off the rock and go after the food source.
Yeah, and it would change body fat deposition. It would change the weight distribution for the bird. It would change all sorts of structural aspects as it became more adapted to water than air.
Right. What's really interesting about penguins, and probably these guys too, is that the same muscles and skeletal structure that birds have that fly, it's the same stuff. So, you could say, well, penguins actually do fly, but they fly in water instead of in the air, because it's the exact same
It's true. It's
physiological thing that's happening. The medium is different, but the main difference is much thicker bones, so they're not as light, so they can't fly because of that, but also their feather structure. They're wearing a
It's
wetsuit
different.
now instead of something that helps them catch wind and stay aloft. So
Right. It's more insulating as opposed to lofting and fascinating adaptations. Oh, a new study has found that kids who were absent from school more often between kindergarten to 8th grades were less likely to vote, reported having greater economic difficulties, and had poorer educational outcomes as adults. And now as adults, this is like 23 to 26-year-olds, but they were followed since they were young. So this was a study that looked at these kids and whether or not their attendance record was good or bad, and then went in with a questionnaire to find out what they did as adults. How much schooling did they go in for in college? How were their jobs? What were they doing in terms of citizenship? Anyway, these results have implications for how parents might want to prioritize school attendance for their kids. And this is especially interesting as we move forward during the current pandemic, and there are questions related to whether or not schools will be open and how many kids will go back to an in-person school rather than remaining online. And what does that online attendance do? Because that is something that's totally new.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there are lots of questions, but this is pretty interesting because aside from, okay, we know that as a child, absenteeism or being tardy affects performance in school. This is looking at linking, it's not causative, but it's correlative with how absenteeism in grade school affects your adulthood.
I would love to look at these results and compare to a cohort of homeschooled children.
Yes, I think that would be very interesting. And
because the first thing I thought of was like the social part of school. Is that what they're missing? The social interaction, the ability to kind of interact with many different types of people and learn about different people's values and experiences. But
they did find, so they did look at socioeconomic indicators, and there was nothing that came out indicative of socioeconomic status. These were pretty much across the board. The only thing that was different was absenteeism.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, but I don't know. I honestly do not know how this compares to homeschooling. That was not something they looked at.
Well, and then there's also the possibility of weird confounding variables. Like if a kid is absent a lot, is that because of a medical issue that is somehow affecting them in other ways?
Right. Yeah.
So I'm one of those kids that didn't go to school every day. I always tried to knock it down to a 4, if not a 3-day school week. Like throughout school. No, seriously. This was like my goal, was like to do 3 a week and no more. And I was, I did read though. Like I would skip school and read. It's just I think it's going to depend on the home environment. Always in these cases.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a first of many studies. I don't know if they looked at contentedness with life, if that's something that was involved in there, because hey, maybe you didn't go as far in school, or maybe you don't have as high powered a job, but you're happy, you're fine with it. Maybe there is something to be said, and there's definitely nuance in numbers always when you break it down.
That's where looking at why the children miss school might be helpful.
Yeah, where does it come from?
You can look
in
at
the first
specific
place?
groupings and how they're impacted. So.
Yeah. Justin, why shouldn't we recycle?
Because you want to keep your ocean clean.
But that's why I recycle.
That's why I recycle. So explain,
please.
Please.
Okay. So there's research from University of Limerick that has evaluated quantified the volume of plastic from European countries that contributes to ocean littering. And what they found was, so 46% is the number they came up with of European. This is separated out plastic waste that they sent out to recycling goes out of the country. 46% of their recycling plastic leaves the country. Of that, 31% ends up in the ocean. It doesn't end up in their ocean. It ends up in an ocean across the continent in Southeast Asia.
Because we're mailing our trash, our recycling to other countries where it's supposed to be taken care of, but it's just being put into giant piles or buried in holes in the ground. This is our concept of recycling.
I think the number I came up with was it makes it 14% of everything that they recycle ends up in the ocean. Like
that's
just
huge.
Yeah. No, it's It's quite
Too
a
much.
large volume.
How can we stop? Why?
So
Let's
it's between
start with-
32,000 to 180,000, depending on the different scenarios they put forward. Tons. 32,000 to 180,000 tons of plastics. That was somebody like sorted out, may have rinsed, put in the recycler, and then ended up.
I
in
think we have been told a story about the recycling that we put into a bin and that gets sent to a company that's supposed to take care of it. And for a large part of it, it is correct, but there is a large part of it that is not, and that has been missold to the public. And maybe to fix the issue, what we need to do more of is the reduce and reuse.
I
We
don't
need to change our
understand
purchasing habits.
why my mayonnaise jar can't just become a new mayonnaise jar, and why it has to go to another country.
So part of the thing is exporting of waste is just that. You're just exporting waste. Part of it might be that those countries presumably are making all of your goods, so the raw materials are best served being recycled there, because you have what otherwise you're just sending back an empty container ship, right? The goods come in, they unload. What do you put back on? You put on plastic, you put on cardboard, and then it just takes the ride back and goes to the recycling centers there. So it's not like you're paying extra to move it halfway around the world. It's sort of built in to the logistics, right? However, not everything that you put in a recycling bin gets recycled, even if it's being recycled here.
Because the plastics especially aren't.
Plastics are all different, and there are whole categories of plastics that do not get recycled at your local recycler that you don't know the difference. So you put it in, and they spend a tremendous amount of time sorting, and then whatever probably gets sorted that they don't use probably goes to a landfill or gets sent halfway around the world. What's a little bit unsettling, though, is those plastics that aren't getting used aren't going to a landfill. Maybe it's too expensive. So you send it out on a boat and you drop it off in the ocean, apparently. Yeah.
So it's intentional. You're saying it's not even an accident that the barge sprung a leak.
They don't say, but yeah, that's kind of what it looks like.
Yep.
It looks like a place. This isn't just your Target bag or your Trader Joe's bag is flying off and then landing in the middle of the ocean, causing this. No, this looks kind of like intentional. This much, for 14% of all things that were supposed to be recycled.
That's not an accident. Yeah.
No, it's 31%. It's a third. Yeah. It's a third of what they export is ending up in the ocean by these estimates of this.
Unacceptable.
Unacceptable.
Yeah.
So we just got to use less plastics. That's what that means. We just really have to phase out plastics where we can.
Or throw them in the trash. Hear me on it.
Biodegradable plastics.
It's your garbage. It belongs in your landfill. Put it where it goes.
But don't we also import or export garbage?
We do export garbage also.
Yeah.
Yes. There's this.
So there's no solution.
Useless plastic is the solution.
I'm going to start exporting my garbage to my next door neighbor's backyard. No, I'm kidding. I would never do that.
No, but you do.
But you that's pretty much like what it is.
That's what you're doing. Yeah.
Well, speaking of plastic in the oceans often looks like jellyfish.
It does.
And something that we often wonder about in the biological community, I know I have, is lots of animals eat jellyfish.
Sea
fish, crustaceans, sea anemones, corals, and of course turtles. Yes. But why? Because they're basically just bags of water. There's no carbohydrates, there's no fats, there's no proteins. It's just water. How does an animal sustain itself on this thing?
It's got to have some of those things.
It has some stuff in it, but what? So University of Southern Denmark wanted to find out exactly what it was in jellyfish that was sustaining ocean life. What are they eating? Also, because this is relevant, knowing that due to climate change, actually, we expect a giant bloom of jellyfish in our oceans. We expect jellyfish are actually one of the winners from rising sea temperatures. So we expect a lot of jellies in our oceans in the future. So they found actually that they contain fatty acids that are valuable to the animals that eat them. They're, of course, vital components for cell membranes and play a crucial role in growth and reproduction. So there's something there. But really what it comes down to is the sheer quantity of jellies they are eating that gets them where they need to go. So they collected moon jellies from a fjord every 2 weeks for 2 years. They looked at the fatty acid content, and it varied within seasons. And they found ultimately that what it comes down to is that jellyfish are really easy to eat. And so it doesn't take a lot of energy to hunt them. So what it might take you to hunt a shrimp, if you're a predator, very quick moving animal like that, lots of protein, small package. But instead, jellyfish, they come in these giant rafts of jellyfish. And so you can just kind of sail through that, chomp, 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 and you can eat jellyfish 20 times faster than something like a shrimp. And so between that and the sheer volume of them, it doesn't take as much energy to load up on them. And so it actually ends up kind of evening out with what it would be to eat normal food.
So it's like, no, it's not like eating celery, because celery takes a lot of chewing.
Right. It'd be more
It's
like
like
subsisting
drinking
on Jello.
It's like Jello or nutritional shakes.
Yeah.
I'm on a
more
meal
thinking of it-
replacement plan.
Yeah.
I'm
It's
more
like if
thinking of
it was
as
Pedialyte that was
Pedialyte.
turned into Jello.
Yeah.
And that's all.
yeah,
you
but
eat.
I'm thinking this is more like fast food because it's just like drive-through. Yeah, not a lot of effort. You go there, you think, same thing. You pull up to the next window, you pay, you get to another window maybe, and then they hand you some food, and then you're off on your way.
And
Versus
you can order it
anytime-
supersized.
Well, it takes, but the idea that it doesn't take a whole lot of effort to go after them.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's just it's an easy, quick meal that if you eat a
Wow.
lot of it, it's enough.
Jellyfish.
Yeah.
Eat more. Okay.
I mean, we all might be eating jellyfish pretty soon. So
It's going to be sushi of the future.
yep.
Speaking of food, the entire genome of the chicken has been sequenced and analyzed, and now we
And-
know where the chicken came from.
The egg.
It did come from an
T-Rex.
egg, but
T-Rex.
specifically the chicken, the modern chicken that we domesticated, showed up in Southeast Asia or southern China approximately 7,500 years ago. It was bred from a pheasant-like bird, a colorful pheasant-like bird, and its closest ancestor is a red jungle fowl subspecies called Gallus spadicius. The chicken.
Gallus.
Yeah.
That's a great name.
But yeah, the modern chicken has been with us 7,500 years, almost as long as dogs.
I would feel like they'd be around longer than dogs, honestly.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it.
That's interesting.
interesting.
That I think I would say can't be right.
Recent evidence
That can't
suggests
be right.
that sled dogs were being bred about 9,500 years ago.
Yeah,
Chickens
because the sled dogs
7,500 years ago. So it was pheasant, but it was pheasant-like birds that we hadn't really domesticated. It's this domestication process that we got started 7,500 years ago, according to genetic evidence.
And by domesticating the chicken, really what we're saying is you don't need big running muscles. You don't need flight muscles. You just need the meat muscles. We want
Just
those
cage
chicken
breeding.
breasts, and we want the thighs. That's what we want.
Mm-hmm. And even back then, it was probably a pretty rangy, skinny little chicken.
Yeah. Like a game hen.
Much
Yeah.
closer to a game hen, jungle fowl type
Yeah.
thing than to today's Rhode Island red with its large breasts. If you just
Yes.
tuned in, this is This Week in Science. And if you are interested in a TWIS t-shirt or a mug or a mask, we have masks now. Our merchandise is available in our Zazzle store. If you go to twis.org and click on the Zazzle link, you can browse it and find some nice items. All right, so let's continue now with our COVID update for the week.
It's good news, right? You have good news for us today?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no. I know. It's terrible.
COVID. All right. We're 6 months into the pandemic. 6 months in. Wow. The World Health Organization reports 10.19 million cases, and that's confirmed cases, and 503,862 deaths. We just went over 500,000 on Monday of this week. The U.S. CDC recorded 2.58 million total cases. That's confirmed cases. There are estimates that there's possibly up to 10% more cases in the United States that have not been diagnosed. We have 126,739 deaths, 370 new deaths this week. According to Johns Hopkins COVID tracker, the United States epidemic is currently following a similar trajectory to what was observed leading up to its first peak in April. And the New York Times estimates that 35 states are reporting increased incidents over the past 2 weeks, and at least half appear to have set records for daily incidents over that period. We are diving back in rapidly, people. So now would be the time to be careful. Potentially, if you're concerned and you stopped being careful at any point. A preprint, however, on the bioRxiv suggests that immunity to COVID-19 might be more widespread than antibody testing estimates suggest, thanks to T cells that seem to be present even after those antibodies have waned in the bloodstream. So I just wanted to do a really quick review of kind of how the immune system works. So the lines of defense in our bodies. It's like, okay, I just inhaled a bunch of air in a grocery store and there's virus in it. There's dust in it. There's all sorts of stuff. What's going to happen? Well, first it's going to come into contact with our innate immune system. It's going to bump up against the mucus that will trap a lot of particles, that those particles will then be moved out of the body, either through the digestive tract or through mucus that runs out of your nose or gets blown out of your head when you blow your nose. And then you also have the contact of viral particles once they get past that mucous membrane, past your first line of defense, into actual contact with the cells of your body. And the virus is going to interact with those ACE2 receptors on the cells in the airways. However, when it's in there, it's also potentially going to bump into B cells. B cells start the process of our antibody response. And sometimes we have circulating antibodies that just happen to match what is invading into our system, and those antibodies can block the proteins that interact with receptors and allow them to get into cells. So the antibodies in this case might neutralize the spike protein for the SARS-CoV-2 virus, and if an antibody binds with that spike protein, it's not going to be able to get into a cell. Woohoo! Antibodies protected you. However, sometimes those antibodies can actually, because they're just little molecules, they're not smart at all, they can connect to other parts of the virus and actually help them gain access to our cells. And so it's thought that there are some antibodies that actually get produced by the B cells in our body that might be helping SARS-CoV-2 get into our cells and our body's systems. Anyway, antibodies, the IgGs, they talk about these immunoglobulins. IgG is one that is often used It's in our bloodstream, and IgG is often representative of our body's ability to neutralize and block a virus. So if you have IgG for SARS-CoV-2 in your bloodstream, you are potentially able to neutralize it, and so we would say that you have immunity. The other aspect of our immunity is T cells. And T cells, these can be killer T cells. They come in and they actually will eat cells that have been turned by the virus into regenerating factories for the virus. So once the virus gets into the cells, it starts trying to make more copies of itself. And so the T cells can come along and say, bad cell, die. And so the T cells are there. So in immunity, we've got the T cell, the antibodies, which may disappear in our bloodstream after a while, but we might have quiet, quiescent memory B cells that are circulating around, that if they come into contact with an antigen from the virus, they'll start turning out more antibodies once again. So just because the antibody level in your blood is low, that doesn't necessarily mean that you aren't immune. Additionally, if you have T cells that have come in contact with the virus or with cells in your body that are putting out virus, those T cells can continue to create immunoglobulins and also attack cells in your body and give you continuing immunity. So antibodies, B cells, T cells, these are all very important. They all work together. And I don't know, Blair, did I cover it?
I think so. But then this is what I don't understand. We've talked before on the show about the convalescent plasma.
Yes.
Do we not know why that works currently?
No, the convalescent plasma should contain antibodies.
Okay.
And it would contain these antibodies that would then get into your body and possibly, hopefully, help your body to recruit more B cells to make more antibody, and also help make your protect you while they're doing that.
But we also are not sure if the antibody situation is forever, like with some illnesses, or if it, if further down the line you could get reinfected. So we still don't know that.
Yeah. But where we are right now is that there's evidence that T cells appear to stick around even when antibodies have disappeared. And that is potentially really good news because that means that if you do get vaccinated and you have a T cell response, then you can have continued immunity. But if you get vaccinated and only have an antibody response, a B memory cell response, an antibody response, that potentially means that you might have to get boosters if you don't have the more long-lived cells actually that create the antibodies going forward existing in your system.
Booster me up.
There may be boosters necessary, but we don't know. This is still, we're so early, but I mean, it's good news that the T cells seem to be there, even as we're seeing that the antibodies might wane in your blood. But that doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily bad news.
I will say it's hard to have hope with this stuff right now because it's, as somebody mentioned in one of the chat rooms, that 500,000 people, those are real people. It's not just a number. Those are people who have families and friends, and people know those people, and that really sucks. But I will say that even a couple months ago, I would not have expected, based on how little we knew, that we would know this much now. And we are making pretty quick moves in understanding this thing and making a game plan. And that's kind of my silver lining is I do think things are moving faster than I anticipated, even though it's not fast enough.
Like,
we should have,
it's not fast
we
enough.
want something right now. And of course we do. But it still feels like it's moving a lot faster than I thought it was going to.
It is. Both the pandemic and the science are moving very quickly. And I just have to tear out a little cloudy lining, which is the leader of our country, which is a global world superpower, which is a hub of people normally traveling throughout the world, remarked that nobody knows why it's 19. Why COVID-19? Nobody knows what that 19 means.
Yeah, we do.
Oh, within the last week. I mean,
2019.
It's so funny. It was discovered in 2019. Yes,
Yeah,
we do know
I'm
these
sorry.
things.
I'm sorry, but it's just too. There should be a limit for the amount of dumb.
So
That's
I'm just gonna following on your comment there. I've been trying to share information about why wearing masks is useful on Twitter. And this week, I stuck a stick in a hornet's nest of individuals, and I found out that there's a whole community of people online who don't believe that viruses cause disease, that don't believe in germ theory, and that's why, like, there's all the stuff we're talking about right now, they would not even hear. And I need to figure out how to talk to people,
Kiki,
and I don't
Kiki,
know if it's possible.
I feel like they still wash their hands after they poop. This is the thing. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, there's still they inherently understand there's something there, and that there's something that's communicable, and there's some sort of massive disconnect. And somebody's feeding them something that
Yes.
is breaking the domino effect of connecting the dots of how this works. It's there. I feel like the logic exists in the human brain, and something is interrupting it.
Yeah, it's called YouTube, and I know we're on YouTube right now, but I hope that we are a sane voice on YouTube among the madness. Another interesting story this week.
All right, but who just to follow this just a slight thread further, who would benefit? Who would benefit from this line
That's
of
a great question. Yeah, it's
and one of them, when you start pulling at the rope and casting the net, the thread, pull the thread to cast, whatever the saying is. I do feel like there are a lot of well-isolated, wealthy people in this country who are taking every precaution and avoiding physical contact with the outside world, who want their businesses to run, that have people who have to be around people for their businesses to run, who are pushing. Yeah. And that is a problem. And this is,
it becomes a class issue. It becomes an economic issue.
It definitely is.
Yeah,
it definitely is a class
Meanwhile,
issue.
somebody is telling someone that wearing a mask reduces the amount of oxygen that you get, and it's a form of mind control. But remember that surgeons wear masks every day. And you trust them to do surgery.
And if any of you, I know that there was a run on oxygen, the fingertip O2 meters. And if at the beginning of this pandemic, it was okay, we know that oxygen saturation is lower in people with
So
COVID,
Marshall bought all of them.
Oh, yeah, my husband bought all of them. Exactly. No, but a lot of people have bought them. And so you can do the test yourself. Wear a mask and breathe just normally do your normal activity, and then sit down and test your O2 levels. Test it before, test it after. And there are surgeons who have been posting their blood O2 levels as a nice, pretty 98 to 99, 100% blood oxygen saturation levels after hours of wearing a mask. And I think if you're healthy, you will find something similar.
I feel like I could find the exact numbers and we could do the social math, but I feel like an oxygen molecule versus
that's so tiny.
Fabric,
Oxygen is so tiny.
It's like a
basketball
on an entire basketball court.
And oxygen is tiny compared to the virus.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, these are factors of scale. Yes. Cells infected with SARS-CoV-2. Dun, 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 get taken over. Their normal processes get reworked to do the virus's bidding. Cells that are infected with SARS-CoV-2 grow filament-like protrusions called filopodia that contain viral particles that researchers think might be used to poke and infect neighboring cells.
Ew.
SARS-CoV-2 makes the cells that infects reach out and touch other cells.
Ugh.
Oh, very interesting.
So interesting.
Yeah.
You gotta hand it to this virus. It's really got it figured out.
It really does. This
Oh my
study is published in
God.
Cell. It's called The Global Phosphorylation Landscape of SARS-CoV-2 Infection. They did a phosphoproteomics analysis of SARS-CoV-2 infected cells. They uncovered that SARS-CoV-2 causes signaling rewiring. It rewires the messaging processes, the mechanisms inside the cell, basically hijacks it to do what it wants it to do, changes a p38 MAP kinase cascade activity, shuts down cell division, the whole cell cycle. Mitotic kinases get stopped and blocked. So the cell cycle doesn't work anymore. It just starts replicating virus. And it has these finger-like, hair-like protrusions that reach out and touch. But the study also, the big aspect, I mean, it's a horrific, the filopodia is kind of like the sensationalist perspective to take to get you into this story. The interesting part is that what they were looking at, the kinase activity that they saw in their analysis, they were able to identify many, many, many potent targets for antiviral drugs and compounds. So that is the interesting thing, that by doing this proteomics analysis, they were able to come up with lots of places we could attack the virus, which is good.
By the way,
for
I
us.
love proteomics is like my favorite thing. Like if I can stay with school long enough, this is what I would be doing someday. It's just always fascinating.
It
But
is.
you know what the analogy that came to mind is this study that was published in Cell magazine. To make it performative, it should have appeared first in Car and Driver magazine. or you know what I mean? Because it starts in the cell, but then it pokes out and ends up somewhere where you wouldn't expect it. They should have published this story in a whole bunch of other magazines.
A whole bunch of
randomly.
other places where it
Just
poked
try to
through.
get the point across to people. It started in Cell magazine, but then poked its way into other publications. This is how this is happening.
It is how it's happening. Anyway, that's what I've got for the COVID update. If you just tuned in, this is This Week in Science. That's right. If you would like to help support This Week in Science, you can head over to twist.org. Click on that Patreon link. You can also sign up for our newsletter. Do you have stress?
Always.
Never.
Chronic
Oh.
stress.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have stress?
You guys
Yes.
do?
Mm-hmm.
You guys stress?
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Mm-hmm.
You're like, you got it all. You have everything. What else do you need?
Well, it
Don't
would
be
be
so
nice.
greedy, and every life is easy.
It would be nice to get rid of the negative results of stress. So
Mhm.
one of the things of not chronic stress necessarily, but acute stress. It's this odd thing.
Baby,
where-
cute little sugar booger sugar.
Yes, it's my little acute. It's a cute little stress. Yes,
Mm.
acute stress. Acute stress. Here and now. It's not chronic over a long term. It's very a specific shorter duration of time. But one of the odd things about acute stress is that it seems to amplify inflammation and the processes of inflammation that might lead to other metabolic disorders and other issues over time. And it's kind of this odd thing because the stress hormones themselves suppress the immune system. So if you've got increased cortisol levels, if you've got, if you've got the stress hormones being increased, then your immune system is downregulated. Your immune system doesn't work really well. When you get stressed out, you get sick more often, right? But long term, these things can also lead to inflammation that can have really long term deleterious effects on your health. And nobody understands what's going on, because if the immune system is getting downregulated, why isn't inflammation getting downregulated too? Okay. So this group of researchers publishing in Cell this week, it's a big one for Cell this week, they looked at a cytokine, an endocrine molecule called interleukin 6. And interleukin 6 has been known to be involved in the stress response for a very long time. But the question is how? How is it involved? So they did a bunch of experiments with mice and with people to break it all down. And they found that interleukin 6 gets turned on by brown fat. That brown fat gets triggered by stress from the brain. Those stress hormones trigger the brown fat. The brown fat creates the interleukin 6, and the interleukin 6 then changes the inflammation. And what it is a trade-off between getting the body ready for mobilizing those fat stores for the fight or flight response versus more long-term health. And so the evolutionary aspect, it's an evolutionary trade-off of survival here and now, protecting my body. The brown fat's like, let's get ready to rumble. And
I want to pause you.
Yeah.
I want to pause it. I
You're
want to
gonna
pause
pause
it.
it. Why?
Because I forget which is the brown fat. The brown fat is not the one you hit first normally. The brown fat is like that reserve, like if you're starving, or is it that's what I want.
Right?
It's the long-term storage fat. It is.
It's
so this is the one that would kick in if you were starving to death, for instance.
Yeah, and it's what's often used in what's called non-shivering thermogenesis. So you can move your muscles and shiver to heat your body up, or brown fat can actually burn itself to create body heat. And hibernating animals.
Resort.
Yeah, this is something that hibernating animals use to get themselves up from hibernation or from torpor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
For a long time, we didn't even know if humans had brown fat, but we do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's involved in some very interesting things like this stress response.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's this, what?
Yeah, well, no, I mean, okay, so take us out of our modern lives of, the rent is due, the bad boss at work, the annoying situation, whatever it is that we run into. Right, the pandemic. But we're just purely animal thing. Like this would kick in when we haven't had a meal for too long, maybe, or the temperature got very dramatically. Make it difficult to keep homeostasis of internal temperatures. So this kicks in normally when we might already have stress factors that we would be encountering. So that's what's fascinating me about this. That's why I needed this clarification, because it is something that in our less modern world we would have utilized when we were already perhaps under stress.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And it would have been, we weren't trying to live long, wonderful lives and, fight diseases
Made it to
of
30.
aging. Yeah, exactly. It was always here or now. Run away from the predator, run away, deal with those stresses. So
by the way, I still think that's a misnomer. No, seriously. Because when we look at those numbers, we also are taking into account early childhood mortality, which was tremendously higher. So when we're talking about people lived till 30, that wasn't necessarily true.
Some of them did live much longer lives.
Much longer lives, but we also have
we didn't have the issue of living long enough to have to deal with the metabolic diseases.
No, but we had this was like this is the revolution of the agricultural age. Wasn't just agriculture; it was grandparents.
Yeah, that's right.
No, that was like the first. That was really like that was the big the evolution of society. Is suddenly there were grandparents around who could watch the kids during the day and also tell you, no, seasons, there's 4 of them or whatever. Like I've seen enough. I can tell you a little bit about the future because I've seen a lot of the past. But when we look at statistics from a while back, you have to remember that lifespan included a tremendously high rate of infant mortality, which is why we talk about infertility. But in the old people if you go back and look at your ancestry, you will likely find a lot of generations that had 7, 8, 9 kids.
Of course,
It
and
was
there was lots
very
of
much
maternal
a game of
death
attrition. Yes,
lots of issues. But this study, looking at the interleukin-6 and this brain brown fat liver axis, like this is the brown fat activates this gluconeogenesis, or the burning of sugars, glucose that's stored in the body for the fasting, like you're talking about, or fight or flight. And it's a response to hypoglycemia, or that fight or flight anticipatory need. And this study, discovering the way that this all worked, they blocked interleukin they blocked the stress adrenal pathway in mice. They blocked interleukin. They pared it all down. So they really did a great job of showing that this is the mechanism of what causes inflammation in the stress response. That before we really didn't know what was doing it, and now we do. And one of the things that goes along with this that's very interesting that we've talked about before is the use of autoimmune drugs like tocilizumab. It's an FDA-approved interleukin-6 inhibitor that is approved for rheumatoid arthritis. It's being currently trialed to treat depression and anxiety. And so this is what potentially links it all together, that there is this link with interleukin-6 affecting the brain, affecting agitation through this like hypoglycemia brown fat pathway. And so there's a lot of work that's going to move on here looking at interleukin-6, not just for the metabolic aspect, but for mental health disorders as well. So that's going to be very interesting. Yeah. This is really, things tie together, and it's like, wow, this is cool. Our body is this very neat interwoven system. It's very fun.
So one thing I'm just thinking about is the more we understand how stress works and how it impacts our body negatively, if we can turn that off. There's some cases like you're talking about with medical issues where it would be good to be able to turn that off. But I'm also thinking about how, for example, us being able to tell what hot feels like is good because it keeps us from burning ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. And there is something about stress and the impact it has on your body where it's hard for you to believe that this is it. And stress is something that has such a huge impact on your body potentially that I would be worried that we were missing something. And by turning off the negative impact of stress, people would be able to continually subject themselves to stress without negative impact.
So it wouldn't, if you blocked the interleukin-6, it wouldn't block the stress hormones. The stress hormones would the cortisol levels and all the things that affect the way that you feel. Those would still be happening because it's not blocking the adrenal pathways at all. It's just if you were to go in to block that interleukin, it would block the negative inflammatory effects that could lead to liver disease or lead to heart disease later on.
I guess I'm just seeing a potential abuse of this where it's like, okay, I don't mind that you're going to go slowly insane from stress because it's not going to kill you.
Okay. dystopian person.
No, man, I could see myself doing it to myself.
So wait a
even.
second.
I
Wait a
can see
second.
myself saying
Wait a
that.
second. Wait a second.
I'll
Well,
just
it's not
Wait a
gonna
second.
kill me.
my pill.
I gotta pause things again. Blair, you're saying that the motivating aspect of stress to you is the fact that it might kill you. And that's
I'm
why you have to
saying-
act upon the stress. If it wasn't going to kill you, you would just be like, I would never act on this stress properly.
Yes.
I don't know if I buy it.
Believe it.
but
I
I
feel
think
like
you
I'm not acting on the stress properly now.
I think you would still feel stressed out. I think
Yeah,
it would
and I
still
guess
be
that's
an
my
issue.
point, is
Yeah.
that I think it's something that still has the potential of having such lasting impacts, whether it's causing inflammation or not, that maybe we need to worry about our stress instead.
I think that is a fair
have already
point.
I've discovered on a lot of levels how to lower stress.
Is it not caring? Because I have trouble
just-
with that.
Just two things. One, lower your expectations.
Mhm.
and find any excuse to have fun. Those are the two rules to beat stress. Lower your expectations and find any excuse to have fun.
Mhm.
That's
That is really, really great advice. That's great advice, Justin. That's what I did on Friday night when I watched the new Will Ferrell Eurovision movie
I thought of you
on
when
Netflix.
I saw that. Yeah.
I lowered my expectations and I went into it going, I'm going to have fun. And you know what? I did. And it was great.
Awesome.
What I did to
okay.
relieve stress? I don't know if you saw this. I got a hotel that had a jacuzzi in the room. By the way, hotel prices are extremely cheap right now.
Great.
Don't go out in public, but maybe a hotel room. Not a bad idea if you want to go somewhere. It was like less than half price.
Nice.
Jacuzzi in the room. I was on a road trip with my 7-year-old daughter. She sees the jacuzzi. She knew it was there, but she's like, I got excited. Turned it on immediately. She's already got like her snorkel mask, getting ready to like go.
Of course she did.
And then I'm empty. I'm unpacking. Like we brought some snacks and some stuff, and I take out this giant thing of bath gel, and I had to say nothing else. She saw it, looked back and forth, grabbed it, flipped it open, and started pouring it in. And we had the most gigantic bubble bath you would ever imagine.
That's great.
It's a way to relieve stress. Find an excuse to have fun, and lower your expectations about getting your deposit back on the room. So both of those
I see.
Okay, moving on from stress. Let's move into some brain eating.
Oh, wait, what?
Uh-oh. No.
Brains. The
Nope.
brains that eat themselves. And this is
Unsubscribe.
really, really a good
That's
thing.
where I live. in
No,
my
this
brain.
is this. Yeah, it's a good thing though. Brains that eat themselves. It's fantastic because when cells die, they can gum up the works and get in the way of
Oh, yeah.
proper cell signaling. If you've got a dead neuron in the middle of a neural circuit, what good is that
Can't
going
find
to
your
do?
keys. Can't find your keys. You will
Exactly.
never find your keys as long as that thing is there.
Yeah, so some researchers for the first time, they're using this method that I think we talked about a couple of years ago. It's called 2-fatal, 2-PHATAL. And it seriously is science magic where they use 2 photons of light to illuminate a single cell within a living animal's brain and watch brain cells do things. And so in this process, they have the very first video of brain cells, glial cells specifically, consuming neurons that have been killed by the researchers in a mouse brain, a living mouse brain. And the reason they did this is they wanted to go in and confirm ideas of how the process actually works. And what they found is that there are 3 microglial cell types that are involved with the process. And microglia astrocytes and NG2 cells, and it's a really coordinated process of cell removal. So when they killed a brain cell in the brain cell, they found that there's a microglia that engulfs the neuron body and its main branches, and then astrocytes go after the dendrites for removal, and then they think that NG2 might help prevent the dead debris from the dead cell from spreading. And so these things, these three cell types work in conjunction to make it happen. And if one cell misses their call time for the dead cell removal, then other glial cells pick up the slack and fix it. They also discovered that as we get older, our glial cells aren't as good at cleaning stuff up. And this might be one of the issues with the problems, the cognitive issues that are seen with aging, the slowing of brain processes.
Just full of junk.
The junk piles up. It gets in the way.
You can't find stuff.
Yeah.
Like, where'd I put it?
Yeah. So we know that the glial cells are good for the supportive role for neurons in the brain, where they're constantly helping bring nutrients to the neurons. They're helping with short distance communication, like really short signals between neurons. They carry some messages. They're really cool that way, but they also are the cleanup crew, and it's important.
Sort of thinking like my memory seems to get better as I've gotten older.
I think that is just,
But I think also
you're special.
But I think I also had
if you can't remember what it was like to think slower. Then
but I realized that might be correlated to the amount of additions that I've made that may have not been positive for brain function
in your youths.
Yeah,
right.
It could be that.
It could be. Couldn't be. No, couldn't be that.
Could be a correlation there.
Again, this is This Week in Science. Thank you for listening to TWIS. You're the reason that we're able to do what we do every week, bringing you the up-to-date, down-to-earth views on science, discoveries, and with your help, we can do even more. With your help, we can bring a sane perspective to a world full of misinformation, and your help would be appreciated. Head over to twis.org right now, click on the Patreon link, and choose your level of support, $10 and up, and we thank you on air at the end of the show. Be a part of bringing sanity and science to more people. Thank you for your support. We really could not do this without you. All right, Justin, tell me some stories.
Antoine Shampoo. I'm just guessing. It's French. It's got an X at the end. Shampoo. Who knows? But she or he is a PhD student at the Global Ecology Lab at Flinders University again. I think that came up earlier. Has cataloged the discovery of a new fern-like plant species. Didn't exactly discover it. The fossil was found in the 1960s by an amateur geologist, Mr. John Irving, on the bank of the Manila River in Baraba, New South Wales, which is in Australia. The fossil was exposed after a flooding took place and wiped away a lot of surface. And the fossil, he sent it in to the Geological Survey of New South Wales, donated the fossil find, which is brilliant. It's great. They put it in a box and it remained there for 50 years.
How many fossils has that happened to? I just don't have time to get to it right now.
We can't get to them in time.
This is another going into the basement and looking at the old donations to see if there's anything there worth not throwing out, right? We've covered this story. We've discovered new whale species, new plants, new insects. We've made tons of discoveries this way. And I keep thinking about Mr. John Irving going like, writing a letter anyway. Dear Sir, Madam, has there been any progress into the research of the fossil that I submitted to you 10 years ago?
Where's my
15, 20
fern?
years ago.
No.
So it turns out this has been dated to the late Devonian period, which, if you're not familiar with your historical ages and periods and such, is about 372 to 359 million years ago.
Long time.
It's extremely old. And it's kind of fun here. It says this is a time when Australia was part of the southern hemisphere supercontinent of Gondwana, but now we're like thinking like maybe it was connected to Canada. Was Canada all the way down? Like we don't know, right? Because of last week, we like maybe that's not the right ancient map. Anyway, this is a time when plants and animals were just beginning to colonize land masses. This is an extremely early plant species, very well preserved. They say it's very fern-like. Fossil is currently in France, where Brigitte Meyer-Bertrand, an international expert studying the first plants on Earth, led a team at the French Laboratory of Botany and Modeling of Plant Architecture and Vegetation. The French laboratory is particularly interested in further examination of Australian fossils from this region, this site. The only thing that I kind of have an issue with on this, I think it's an awesome discovery. Super early plant, and it's apparently a very nice fossil, very well preserved, especially for its time. They named it. They named it after a colleague who had passed, which is nice. But they did. But Erwin got not. He found it. He sent it in. He got not. He's not mentioned.
Got nothing.
He got nothing. He waited his whole life and died not knowing the impact of his discovery. And they're like, yes, we're honoring one of our colleagues who's passed, who's very influential in this field. I think it's because he was an amateur. I think it's a little professional amateur bias, but that's okay. It's the French are still doing that. They've always done that. They've always done that. That's fine. But still really cool to know that you can find a fossil of a 370-something million-year-old plant.
If I may, I've always said that ferns
The record
are to plants as crocodiles are to vertebrates. In that they've been around when dinosaurs roamed the earth. And it's just a fun little it's like a fun time capsule thing. I look at a crocodile and I think, holy heck, you've been around forever. Like I could go back in time and I could see you wandering around almost exactly the same. And I think that about ferns too. Mm-hmm. They're so cool.
They can see in this fossil the walls of the cells.
Oh wow.
So good.
It's not, it's like a high definition fossil find. Lost for 50 years. Lost for 370 million years.
I wonder what it will tell us, like as they start digging into it more and more. About the evolution of structures in the fern family, or like we were talking about the bird evolution earlier. What structures make it succeed in one environment versus another. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you have other stories?
I don't. I had some others. I had a story about the giant penguin. And
I see that now. Story. Yeah.
I had another story about like a penguin that wasn't a penguin in like Canada or whatever, but like it's okay.
The giant penguin that wasn't a penguin, that's the same story.
Yeah, Blair.
Is it the same story or are they two different stories?
Blair, no, it's the same story. Blair found two stories that I brought them late and put them ahead of mine. It's okay. It happens. It happens every once in a while. It's a little bit. It's been a lot rare since we actually put our stories into a thing that we can all see. So if we go there and see, oh, somebody brought it, I should put. But it still happens. It's okay. No, it was funny though. Every once in a while, when we were doing the show in the basement of KDVS, the UC Davis campus, we would print out our stories on our home computers, and we had no communication whatsoever ahead of time. We'd come in, and every once in a while, we had like, oh, I brought that too. Crumple, crumple, crumple. I brought that. Okay, crumple, crumple. Wow, we brought like 3 of the same stories. Crumple, crumple. Okay. All right, we'll just have to talk slow. That's how we'll get through the hour. We'll talk.
This is This Week in Science. You want to help our show grow? Get a friend to subscribe today. Hey, I do believe it is time for Blair's Animal Corner.
With Blair.
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. If you want to hear about animals, she's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels. There's Animal Corner.
And maybe
What
now
you
giant
got, Blair?
penguins.
Yeah, not giant penguins. We already talked about them. They're benched for the rest of the day. But I do have a story about long-tailed tits and their ability to figure out who they're related to just based on their sounds of their calls. So in a lot of bird species, the babies, when they grow up and they mature, they can kind of leave the area. And by doing that, animals that do that, by and large, can avoid incest. We know that incest is a problem for populations as a whole because it increases the ability for bad mutations to pop up and for recessive genes to pop up. And both of those things can impact the health of the population as a whole because the generations of offspring can have health problems, and that can impact their ability to reproduce, and it can have this ripple effect. So generally speaking, that is why incest is bad in the animal kingdom. So knowing that if you have a type of bird like the long-tailed tit that actually hangs out where they were born for their lifetime, that increases the possibility of incest, which is a problem. So either there has to be a way to work around that, or this species should have disappeared. So what has happened? So the way that they stay at the nest, actually, they learn calls when they're babies, and then they stick around and help raise related chicks. So all of that to say that it's a family affair from day one. So they breed close to home. They raise their chicks along with brothers and sisters and moms and dads. And so what they do is when they're learning their calls in their nest when they're growing up, it means also that offspring and siblings, their calls are similar. And in fact, by doing a 25-year-long study, they were able to look at how different or similar particular calls were. And it was that they were able to build pedigrees of known individuals over many generations, cross-reference those against relatives and non-relatives, and look at behavioral decisions based on all of that. And there was a huge similarity. Calls within breeding pairs were they were more similar to that observed among distant relatives or unrelated birds. So that's the sciencey way of saying they were most different. So the among the relatives, their calls are very similar. Among non-relatives, and particularly with breeding pairs, they were very different. So they think that they can actually recognize a similar call to their own and say, oh, you sound like my brother, or you sound like my cousin, or you sound like my mom. I am not going to try to mate with you.
That's a pretty awesome layer to the strategy. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean,
it
you
seems to
would
be a pretty
hope
good
that recognition would be there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But it depends for each species. So there's a lot of mammals, for example, I can speak to kind of captive management of mammals that you have to separate related individuals, or when they hit
Right.
estrus, they will mate because they don't know. They don't have, because their ecology is such that when they grow up, they separate. So if you're used to putting distance between you and your relatives, you're less likely to come across a relative and mate with them. You're more likely to come across someone who you're not related to. When there's an animal where they're being pushed into space or they're sharing space with relatives, there has to be some sort of signaling. And it could be a call, as in this case. It could be hormonal. It could be some sort of hormones. It could be patterns, colorations. There's any number, location. There could be any number of things that could help tip you off, because this is a really important thing to figure out as a successful animal.
Yeah,
Very
incredibly. I think that's an interesting point that you're bringing up, though. It's just when you've got animals that normally would distribute themselves, they don't have to worry about it. So when you artificially put them in the same environment, the keepers have to worry about it.
Right.
But if
also
if it's an
habitat
organism,
destruction and climate change,
yeah,
now also animals are getting pushed together that weren't before.
Yeah. So there's new forces at work that are definite, that could, if it happens, I mean, most of it is happening too quickly for adaptation to take place. And so there's the potential for fitness decline because of those challenges.
Yeah. But if there's a species that has potential markers that could be caught on to quickly, you could see pretty quick evolution in behavior to compensate.
Yep.
It's possible.
Yeah. But as it is, these little tits, they're able to tell these calls apart, recognize their mom's voice versus their sister's.
Yeah.
That's good. Good job, little birds.
And now
it's time for you to terrify us, right?
I would like to end on a nice bedtime story.
There we go.
About flying snakes.
No.
Yeah. Did you guys know snakes fly?
No.
Yeah, of course they do. Of course they do. How else do they travel?
So this isn't like, oh, they fly but on the ground, like with the penguins. No. They actually fly.
No, they're on a plane, isn't it?
Snakes on a plane.
There's a whole movie about it. I never saw it, but I just assumed.
So there is one
on
family of snakes, Chrysopelia, which they are the only known limbless vertebrates capable of flight.
When you say flight, what the heck are you talking about?
Well, let me tell you.
I think we've talked about this before on the show, and I was horrified then. But yes, please.
Yeah. So
please.
They basically, what they do is they jump out of a tree. They curve their body into a J shape. They spring up and out. And then as they launch, they reconfigure their shape. They flatten their body out. They look like a ribbon. Everywhere but the tail, they're flat. They're kind of domed at the top, but on the bottom, they look completely flat and wide. It becomes a quote-unquote morphing wing. It produces lift and drag, and it forces airflow so that it as it goes down from gravity, it actually kind of carries it further and slows down its descent. So it's more of a glide, but they're airborne. They're definitely airborne. So researchers collected motion capture data from 131 live glides made by paradise tree snakes in this family of flying snakes. And
it's kind of like paradise.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool. So they did this. They collected the actual flights. Then they actually teamed up with aerospace and ocean engineers and mechanical engineers to develop a 3D model. They looked at the frequencies of undulating waves, their direction, their forces acting on the body, and mass distribution. And they were able to then run virtual experiments to investigate aerial undulation and how exactly to optimize flight for snakes. So the original thought was that these snakes undulate, they move back and forth, right? For all kinds of reasons on land or in trees. And the lead researcher says that's their basal program. By program, I mean their neural muscular program. They're receiving specific instructions. Fire this muscle now, or now fire that muscle, fire this muscle. It goes beyond snakes. The pattern of creating undulations is an old one. It's possible that the snake gets into the air, then it goes, what do? I'm a snake. I undulate. Love it. So
but that didn't look like how a snake moves on the ground.
Yeah, so it's similar.
Well, that's based on a little video clip that's playing on the YouTube version.
It's similar, but it looks a little different.
Something's weird
Probably
about it.
because you're looking up at it from below. But so then they wanted to see what role this undulation has in movement. So they turned it off in the simulations and they basically just dropped. So there's something about this undulation that enhances rotational stability. They actually say it's like a frisbee. So because of like the rotation of the frisbee, it keeps it straight and it carries it further. And that's how the undulation works for the snakes.
This is like giving me a whole new appreciation for frisbee golf.
Yeah.
Except it's
just
frisbee
use it
snakes.
with snakes. Yep. So the aerial undulation not only kept the snake from tipping over during glides, but it increased horizontal and vertical distances traveled. So it helped them get further more effectively. So the snake is able to balance the lift and the drag forces its flattening body produces rather than being overwhelmed and toppling or dropping. This is the part I know Kiki's going to love, is that from here, there is a potential for their 3D model to continue exploring snake flight. They want to do outdoor experiments to gather motion data from longer glides. And next, they want to increase the effectiveness of flight. So what if they could get it to move so that actually they could fly upwards, not just glide slowly down? They think they might be able to make robotic snakes that would be able to fly. And of course, they say this is for search and rescue and disaster monitoring. But really, we know what it's about. It's just robotics, people wanting to make flying snakes.
That's pretty much the truth.
Okay. I have so many questions.
What do you got?
Okay. One, where are they flying from?
Tree to tree.
Okay. I now need to know how they're getting up the tree. Wait, I didn't know. Okay, I didn't know snakes climb trees.
Oh, yeah. There are lots of arboreal snakes.
Okay. That's one. The other is are they just trying to get down to the ground, or are they like a hawk and be like, I see something, and I want to go down and get it?
Yes. There is an amazing video if you Google Paradise Flying Snakes. I think it was an episode of Planet Earth or some show like that, but you actually get to see one of these flying snakes scope out a lizard, fly to catch it, and then, big fat spoiler alert, the lizard also has wings.
Oh, God.
What? A little dragon? It's a little dragon.
No.
So this is all to say, in the rainforest, what makes a rainforest a rainforest? Of course, rain. It's the wettest habitat on land. But it also has this massive vertical space. So you learn in grade school usually about the different layers of the rainforest, all the animals that live in all the different layers of the rainforest. But that means that there are some animals like snakes and lizards that never hit the forest floor. They spend their entire life in the trees. Yeah. And so you have to have a way to move from tree to tree and use your environment effectively. But if you're a snake, how do you do that? This is how.
You fly.
Yeah.
You are a glider. You are a flyer. Wow.
Mhm.
This is,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's another reason why I may never visit tropical areas of the world.
They're not going to hurt you. You're too big to eat.
Too big.
They're looking for lizards. You're
I
fine.
know. I know.
You just, if they fall in your hair, just go, "Hi, snake,"
Hi, Snake.
and move them. They're fine. Also, you're probably
Try
too far
not to
down in the
scream.
trees.
Oh, good. Good. Keep me far away from the snakes.
Mhm.
I know lots of people in our audience might love the snakes. I hope you
Snakes
do.
are great.
Yes. Thanks for the nightmare juice, Blair.
No, man, snakes are great. They're pest control. Without
They
them,
are.
we'd all be in big trouble.
Oh yeah, snakes are absolutely important. I'm not sure how important the robotic flying snakes are going to
No.
be in the future, but who knows? I could be entirely wrong.
Well,
On this one.
Fnord Prefect in the chat room was asking, could someone explain to me why we need flying robot snakes? Okay, it's because we don't have them yet,
Yeah,
It's
that's why.
obviously.
Yeah, I
That's
do
obviously
feel
the
like
reason.
there's something with legs that could do that, and it would be fine. I'm not sure. I guess, the idea is if you have like a collapsed building and there's lots of rubble and small spaces, a robot snake would be really effective because you could slither into spaces that are very small and get into places where people could be trapped. Why they need to fly? Again, I am not sure.
We can drop them from helicopters, obviously.
Obviously.
Of course,
All
that's
right.
also why we're developing the flying robotic spider. So it's going to be a competition
No.
to see who gets there first.
The
I'm good with
spider.
that one.
Who will win, the spider or the snake? All right. Let's dive into the last segment of the show. This week in Science Questions. I don't know what happened to Justin there. He ran away. He ran away from the spiders and the snakes. This question comes from Gaurav Sharma. He says, people often talk about having a strong or weak immune system or a weak immunity. What determines the strength of an immune system? Can people who have been exposed to more viral load on a regular basis, like those who live in crowded slums, as an example, expect to have better chances of surviving COVID-19 because their immune systems are stronger? Fan of the show. Thanks. So the thing that determines your immune system's strength is the health of your body. It also is determined by your genetics. So there are aspects of your immune system that might not work, and so you might be immune compromised. That would be a particularly weak immune system, not able to respond to things. A strong immune system is one that is potentially, we talked earlier in the show about stress dampening your immune response, that the stress hormones actually make it so that your immune system can't respond to the extent that it normally would. And those things are really important. So when people talk about getting proper sleep, exercising, having a proper diet, and how that goes into a strong immune system, it's true. It really goes a long way towards just your whole body system working as a well-oiled machine. Now,
And
when
can I
people-
add
There's also-
too, because we
there's
talked
also
about it
things-
before, stress. Stress is also related.
Yeah. So there's also things that you can do, but there's also things that you can do to dramatically lower your chances of having a serious COVID infection, which has nothing to do with masks or your immune system, which is have a type O blood.
Right. So there's that genetic aspect again.
Yeah,
There are
it's
things that
just-
have nothing to do with the virus, really, other than how it interacts with your body.
Yeah, it's the places and attachments that the virus can exploit somehow. So part of this also comes down to we've talked about this before, but the lining of blood vessels and gut bacteria have this weird connection, which also is connected to types of blood. So there's a lot of interplay in the way the body's operating that we are just scratching the surface on and starting to understand these two receptors, all this sort of thing. But yeah, blood type is a not a cause of, it's not
Right.
a preventative thing, the blood itself, but it is telling you that at some point on a chromosome, there was an expression that is probably linked to something else that's over or under expressing something that is affecting downstream of it. So yeah, it's a lot.
But the question of if you live in a more crowded area, so we talk often about preschools being petri dishes, and
Yes.
I have never experienced as many colds that I recall as when my son was in preschool and brought all those colds home to me, and it is quote unquote strengthening your immune system in that you are getting exposed to more viruses. And I remember last week, Blair, you were talking about your summer camp and all the kids from the different schools coming together and bringing whatever it was that was circulating at their different
Sharing.
petri dishes together, right? It's like, let's combine our petri dishes. And so if you hadn't been exposed to something, we talked about antibodies, you don't have the antibodies for them until you've been exposed and your body has a chance to react. So being in a more crowded place, a place that's potentially a little dirtier, your body is potentially going to have been exposed to many more things. And maybe you have antibodies to other coronaviruses that help lessen the effect of COVID-19 when it does actually infect you. But since you've never been exposed to COVID-19, you don't have that, and your body is just going to react in the way that it can in that moment based on your genetics and your health.
And someone in the chat room, HNEK, in the YouTube chat room, also put in a really good point, which is, sure, if you live in a poor community or in a slum, as the question asked, you might be exposed to more things, but you also might have less access to healthcare, work more, have higher stress levels. So
that's
there's
going to bring your immune
there.
system down. And so you won't be able to fight things off as easily. You might get sicker. Yeah, exactly.
And greater levels of pollution. Also.
And we've been seeing so many studies in the last few months even about how air pollution is a huge problem for these respiratory diseases, these viruses. Yeah, so there are lots of things out there. If you see claims that something is going to boost your immune system or strengthen your immune system, we don't really have evidence that vitamins can strengthen your immune system unless you are deficient in those vitamins to start with. For the large part, our body will use vitamins and pee out everything else that it doesn't need. So if you're taking a lot of vitamins to try and boost your immune system, it's not necessarily going to help. I mean, there are questions about how vitamin C interacts and whether that can strengthen your immune system. But when it comes down to it, as far as we know, there's not much you can do to, do immune system push-ups.
Yeah, I take vitamin C when I feel like I'm getting sick, and I'm very aware every time I put it in my mouth that it could be a big fat placebo. And you know what? Like, maybe that's okay. Maybe it's telling me, hey, listen, body, don't you get sick. So that could be what's happening, is I'm just alerting my immune system. I'm heightening the guard on my body by taking that vitamin C. I'm saying, listen up. I can feel this happening. I'm not with it.
Well, my only word of wisdom would be anybody who is trying to sell you a supplement, avoid them. Like if you want to go and do your homework and say like, oh, I think I would like this, and maybe you need it, maybe it's a placebo, go ahead and try it, do your thing. But if you're listening to somebody who is telling you Dr. Justin's not a real doctor, boo pills are going to make your digestive system, leave them immediately. Stop listening to them. Stop participating in their media, whatever it is. I'm talking to you, Dr. Oz. I'm talking to all of the charlatans and the snake oil salespeople out there in the world in this unregulated industry of supplements. They're liars and cheats. All of them. All of them. Who sell you these things, attempt to. All of them are lies.
They're selling things, and there's not a lot of evidence behind
Right.
these things that they're
And
selling.
vitamins, as they are not considered medicine, are not subject to the same checks and balances and testing and all this kind of substantiating that we require of our medicines.
Yeah.
So they can pretty much say whatever they want.
And your point on the placebo, Blair, if something is making you less stressed because you feel like you're doing something to protect your immune system,
Yeah.
potentially that reduction in stress is what is keeping you healthy.
Yeah, as long as it's vitamin C tablets and not hydroxychloroquine, which is
Right.
likely going to kill you.
Ding, 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 ding,
So,
ding. Yeah. Just make sure you're
levels.
taking something
Levels,
that's not
people.
dangerous.
Register the levels of your...
Yeah. If you're taking something that does nothing, but it doesn't hurt you, that's a bummer, but it's a waste of money. But if it makes you feel
Okay.
better, great. But
That's okay.
if it's not going to help you and it's going to hurt you potentially, that's a problem. Or if you're taking something away from someone who actually needs it, which was the case with hydroxychloroquine. So, ooh.
Yeah. Oh boy, oh boy. All right. If you have questions for us, send them in. Do you have questions about science that you would like us to answer, or that could be answered with some amount of our scientific knowledge and know-how? We'll do our best to answer those questions. That's right. Send them in to our Facebook page, or you can email me, Kirsten at thisweekinscience.com. Anyone have any final thoughts, parting jokes, words of wisdom for the end of the show?
Words of wisdom.
Sorry, I put you.
Let's work on flattening the curve, but in the right direction, horizontally, as opposed to vertically, which is where we're at.
Lower your expectations and seek out any reason to have fun.
Wear a mask.
Wear a
do
mask,
that.
please, everybody. And social distance, wash your hands, use your common sense, and make sure to come back next week for This Week in Science. Thank you for listening. We have finished another show. I hope that you enjoyed it. Shout outs to Fada for help with social media and show notes, Gord for manning the chat room, ID4 for recording the show, and I would like to thank our Patreon sponsors and Burroughs Welcome Fund for their generous support. Thank you to Paul Disney, Andrew Swanson, Stu Pollock, Ed Dyer, Ken Hayes, Costi Ranke, Eric Combs, Craig Landon, Tony Steele, Alex Wilson, Steve DeBell, Joshua Fury, Philip Shane, Mark Massaros, Richard Porter, Sky Luke, Brian Condren, Richard Eric Knapp, Jason Roberts, Matthew Litwin, Jack Baldpalder, Guillaume, Dave Neighbor, EO, Kevin Parachan, Matt Sutter, Aaron Luthen, Christopher Rappin, Brendan Minish, Greg Briggs, Robert, Gary S., Marjorie, Rudy Garcia, Kurt Larson, Steve Leisman, Sean Lamb, Gary Riley, Greg Riley, Jim Drapeau, Christopher Dreyer, Brian Carrington, Jason Olds, John McKee, Paul Artyom, Ulysses Adkins, Kevin Reardon, Noodles, Dave Wilkinson, Sue Doster, Paul Ronovich, Daryl Myshak, Dave Friedel, John Ratnaswamy, Stephen Albaran, Mountain Sloth, Rodney Lewis, Sarah Chavez, Corinne Benton, John Gridley, Jean Tellier, Patrick Pecoraro, Darwin Hannon, Matt Bass, Dan K., Sarah Forfar, Donald Mundus, Howard Tan, Josiah Zahner, Taylor P.S., Ben Bignell, Maddie Perrin, Mark Hessenflow, John Atwin, Ali Coffin, Ben Rothig, John Lee, and Flying Out. Thank you for all of your support on Patreon. And if you're interested in supporting us, you can find information at patreon.com/thisweekinscience, or just click that Patreon link at twist.org. On next week's show,
We will be back on Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific time. Yes, you can.
I was going to do a real quick shout out for someone who just donated in the YouTube chat room.
Oh, yeah.
Gregory Jones just donated $32.10. So
Thank you, Gregory.
Thank you, Gregory Jones. All right, now on next week's show.
We will be back on Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific time, broadcasting live from our YouTube channels and Facebook channels and from other channels like twist.org/live.
Hey, do you want to listen to us as a podcast? I mean, of course you want to look at our beautiful faces, but maybe if you just want to listen for once, maybe you want to multitask or something. I don't know. Just search for This Week in Science wherever podcasts are found. If you enjoyed the show, please get your friends to subscribe as well.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes and links to stories will be available on our website, www.twist.org, and you can also sign up for our newsletter.
Hey, you want to contact us directly? Email Kirsten at thisweekinscience.com, Justin at twistminion@gmail.com, or Blair at blairbaz@twist.org. Hey, that's me. Just put twist, TWIS, in the subject line, or your email will probably end up in a muck-filled swamp where we'll never read it.
Yeah, it'll end up in the middle of the South Pacific Ocean.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, with a bunch of plastic.
With a bunch of plastic that didn't get recycled. You can also ping us on the Twitter, where we are at Twist Science, at Dr. Kiki, at Jackson Fly, and at Blair's Menagerie. We love your feedback. If there's a topic you would like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, a haiku that comes to tonight, please let us know.
We'll be back here next week, and we hope to join us again for more great science news.
And if you've learned anything from the show, remember,
It's all in your head.
This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. This week in science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth. And I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 I've got one disclaimer, and it shouldn't be news, that what I say may not represent your views, but I've done the calculations and I've got a plan. If you listen to the science, you may just yet understand that we're not trying to threaten your philosophy. We're just trying to save the world from jeopardy. Jeopardy.
Flying
This
snakes.
Week in Science is coming your way. So everybody listen to everything we say. And if you use our method instead of rolling a die, we may rid the world of toxoplasma gondii. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 I've got a laundry list of items I want to address, from stopping global hunger to dredging Loch Ness. I'm trying to promote more rational thought, and I'll try to answer any question you've got. But how can I ever see the changes I seek when I can only set up shop 1 hour a week? This Week in Science is coming your way. You better just listen to what we say. And if you've learned anything from the words that we've said, then please just remember it's all in your head. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in 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 Science.
So my dad sent me a picture. Whoop! Gotta turn off the music. We're in the after show now, everyone. We're here in the after show. My dad sent me the cutest picture
Oh.
of himself and his wife, and they both have TWIS masks with their names on them.
Oh. I love that.
They're personalized, so they've got their names on them. They're
Ugh.
so cute.
I love it. I was wondering what it said under there.
Isn't that adorable?
Oh
like,
my
thanks,
gosh.
Dad.
Oh, cute.
I love it. I love it. Thanks, Dad. Thanks for supporting me. Wearing your twist mask. That's right.
So Justin's gone.
He just disappeared entirely now.
No, he
he-
wrote us in the chat. He said, "Gotta go. 13-hour day at work, and I'm beat. See you next week."
Oh, he's gone. He's just like, I'm out.
He's gone.
All right, fine, whatever. I understand. Yeah, he's working some long, hard days right now, which it's good. It's good to be working long days, but it's hard. Ooh, HNEK is getting some Blair art masks. Mm-hmm. What else? I also have some pictures. Let me see, was it Twitter that somebody sent me a picture? In the messages.
Ugh.
Somebody sent me.
Ew, I logged into
I
Twitter
wonder
to
where
see
it
if
was.
somebody tweeted to me during the show.
Mm-hmm.
Trending in the United States. You guessed it. The word Nazi.
Great.
That's not great. That really bums me out. I gotta tell ya. I'm bummed.
Yeah.
Oh.
Had a really interesting conversation yesterday about how so when Germany was rebuilding after World War II, they looked at the United States and how we had gone about emancipation and the things that we had done, and basically everything that we had done wrong with Jim Crow laws and all sorts of stuff. And they basically Germany was like, all right, let's not do those things, with the Civil War and basically allowing Confederates to continue to, who had fought against the Union, to be able to continue to maybe not have their slaves, but to raise money, to work, to have land. They didn't have things taken away from them. They didn't go to jail. There are statues of them all over the and we allowed that to happen because we want, people were like, let's make everything okay, right? And Germany instead, they, with the white power Nazi movement, they basically outlawed everything. People were killed. They got rid of any statues. They, in the schools, taught that Nazism is bad. They
Swastikas are illegal.
Swastikas were illegal. They looked at how we came out of the Civil War and where it led us, and how we're we're still dealing with those problems because we didn't address it appropriately. We didn't stamp it out, 100 years ago. But yeah. So anyway, it's really interesting. It's like, oh, great. Yeah.
Oh no.
It makes me really sad that it's even still a thing.
I just found out why it's trending.
Oh no, why?
It's Trump's new logo for his 2020 campaign. It's an eagle holding a circle with the American flag in it. So it looks a lot like the logo for the Nazi Party. That sucks. God, come on, guys. Oh. Oh, this is terrible.
I haven't seen it.
I just saw it. Oh no. I don't get it. Like, you just can't. Like, 6 million people were killed.
Yeah.
you gotta fact check this stuff. You gotta just, even if you want to say this is a mistake, which I don't know, but even if you want to say this is a mistake, you gotta have people looking at this stuff. You should be like, oh, Mr. President, it looks kind of like a Nazi thing. Maybe we shouldn't. Oh boy. Okay.
Is he going to change it?
No. No. Doesn't appear so.
Oh, good. It's not trending on my trending things. I don't need to know. That's just not okay.
That is a big, big bummer.
Hmm. Well, it's going to have a huge reaction, for sure.
Ooh. Okay, well, anyway, let's talk about something else.
Yeah.
I'm really bummed. That really sucks.
Let's have, yeah.
Oh.
I like the fact that there are big conversations about our country's history happening now, and that, we've been talking for a long time about how what's being taught in the schools is not what really happened. And then there's Barr's comment about history being written by the victors, and we need to change some of that history. It's time to, okay, well, who are the victors now? We're going to change that. We're going to rewrite that history. Yeah. Yeah, Eric and AK says he doesn't admit to errors. And it's true.
That is true.
Yeah, somebody in there thinks it sends the right message. Exactly, Identity 4.
Oh yeah, I saw HNEK. I saw Vanilla Ice was trending too. I guess he's doing a concert, I think in Florida somewhere. And when someone said like, "Hey, you're in an area with a lot of coronavirus cases. Maybe do you not want to have this concert?" He goes like, "This is a 90s revival concert, and there was no coronavirus in the 90s."
What?
Okay.
What? That doesn't even make sense. Ugh. Oh my God. So apparently on Twitter, like somebody has decided that I am a hashtag talking head for hashtag big pharma.
Oh, that's funny.
I've gotten so many wonderful responses.
Oh yeah, people are pissed, I'm sure.
24 hours.
Yeah. I got some funny responses from I shouty blared. You saw that one. I said from the start we should have just lied and told people that the mask was for the wearer.
Yeah, just why not?
Because like this is the problem. We were in California last year. I think I said this on the show last week. And like people did not walk from their house to their car without a mask on because it was smoky outside.
Mm-hmm.
So they wanted to protect themselves. But because we're protecting each other, people are like, "Oh, I don't need to put it on. I'm just running across the street." Or like, "Oh, I don't think I'm going to see anybody." Or like, "Oh, I forgot my mask. Screw it." So like, because it's for everyone else, there's like these little allowances we're allowing that I don't think would be the case if we were protecting ourselves with it. Yeah. Everyone would be like, the Rona. And like, they'd have their mask on all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, they would. I mean, there is so much when you start digging into public health communication. It, like for years, the messages that are told for particular reasons, and the messages that are spread there is a goal of certain actions being taken by the public. And so, yeah, like when we started, it was, no, masks aren't helpful because we needed to preserve the N95s for everybody, right? And that was a lie. And people were upset about that, or now they're confused and they're like, why are you flip-flopping? And Yeah, it just and then you can't have the conversation anymore because now they don't now there's the trust in the source has been
Yeah. Well, but
has
that's the
has
problem
been
is like, if I can be Justin for a second, since he's not here, like this all
Mhm.
comes down to a misunderstanding of what science is, because there's no such thing as flip-flopping in science. That's called taking in new data and responding to it. That's
Yeah.
like that's the cornerstone of science.
Yeah, somebody told me I shared a link to a Lancet article, and somebody said they linked to another Lancet article on hydroxychloroquine that had been retracted. And they said, you can't trust the Lancet. Look, they're retracting papers. How can you trust this outlet? And it's like, well,
That's how
actually,
science works.
that's how science works. And it's unfortunate that they rushed to publish the paper, but the reality is I trust them more because they did retract it. Because they actually went through the process of saying, this is wrong. This science is not good anymore. And basically did everything lives on the internet forever now, but basically said this study is not a good study anymore. And they put that message out there so that scientists moving forward will not use that study to inform their experiments and their thought processes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but it's because somebody doesn't understand how science works. They're like, you can't trust the Lancet. It's like, no, you can. It's a very good, distinguished journal. I trust the Lancet.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, Danielle Yount is saying the issue was we needed PPE for medical workers. So like we didn't
Yeah,
want to tell
we
people to
did.
wear the mask. But see, this is part of the problem too, is there were people out there going, well, we could tell people to wear masks, but they'll hoard them.
Mhm.
So we can't tell them to wear masks, which also is indicative of a much bigger problem. That's the first thing people did was buy out pallets of disinfectant and toilet paper and then start trying to sell it for 10 times what it's worth.
Yep.
And doing the same with masks. And it's like this is why we can't have nice things. Like we could have told the public the truth. You can wear a mask. That would be helpful. But really the hospitals need them. So don't overbuy. If people could be trusted with that information, but people couldn't. So it had to be a stepwise communication. And I understand it. And I'm glad they did it that way, especially speaking as someone who has a loved one who's a healthcare worker.
Because it preserved the PPE for him and for others like him. Yeah.
So I'm thrilled
still
that
an
they
issue,
didn't tell
but-
people to wear masks right away.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I don't know, but now it's a whole thing and now it's freedom. But somebody came up with the hashtag to call them freedom masks.
good.
So that now it's like, no, here is your freedom mask. Wear this mask for your freedom. It's your freedom mask. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
I like it.
Well,
Communication's hard and the internet is full of
yeah. A soundbite doesn't always do it, is the problem.
Yeah.
Science doesn't often work in headlines. And I think that's
No.
it comes down to that too, is how do you communicate? We talked about COVID for 15 minutes tonight. How do
I
you
know,
get
and
that
we've-
across in 2 sentences?
And we've talked about COVID for at least that long on just about every episode over the last several months. And, normally with different studies involved, but we do that every week. Yeah, but exactly. How do you do that? How do you do 10 words, 20 words in a headline, right? How do you get those ideas across?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. MMGA. What did you think of the show flow tonight?
I would like to try it again. I liked it, but it still felt a little uncomfortable. It was a little different. I feel like, especially because I think we're good at keeping the quick stories quick when it's at the end of the show, because we're like, oh, it's late and we want to go to bed.
Except
but
for Justin.
yeah. But when it's at the beginning of the show and we're just getting to see each other, I just think it's going to take a little adjusting to like figure out how to keep it kind of quick and
Shorter.
succinct at the beginning of the show. It's not what we're used to doing. We're used to chatting it up over a coffee or a drink, like for 90% of the show, and then be like, oh, did you hear about this? Oh, did you hear about this? Good night. So like, but yeah, I'd love to see what happens if we try it again too.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All of you out there watching, let me know what you thought of the show flow. Thunder Beaver said it was a decent flow. Yeah, they weren't really a quick headline rundown. That's true. We haven't nailed it. I mean, I threw the new rundown at Blair and Justin today. So everybody nobody was prepared, and so this was like a pilot, a run through, a read through, if you will.
So if we want to kind of emulate what Daily Tech News Show does a little bit more, we can. I think the only way to get those things really short and succinct is to pre-write exactly what we are going to say about the headlines and read it and have an understood number of sentences that are allowed.
Yeah, an understood number of like comment or question.
Yeah. I mean, in their show, they don't
have a timer.
Comment on them at all.
The very first headlines.
The headlines,
the very first headlines are just headlines, and they go very quickly. And then they have the stories that have a bit of discussion, and then they have their main discussion thing at the end. Am I shooting for shorter shows? No, not necessarily. Maybe slightly shorter, but I love everybody who is here, but I also want to make the show more accessible to the casual listener who, doesn't know us yet, and who, maybe it's kind of hard to get into who we are and what we're doing. So it might be easier I think it might be easier for a new listener to dive into the show if we have kind of that quicker pace at the beginning of the show to get people into it and get people warmed up and like, oh yeah, science, that's good. And then we can have an interview, and then we can have So I'm figuring it out. But yeah, and Noodles, I do agree that DTNS, there's something about DTNS that's too strict, and I think they're aiming for a half hour. Like they want the show
down to the second.
That shows a half hour, and I don't think we need to do. I don't care to do a half hour show. That's not who we are. I mean, if we were to do a half hour show, I think it would be a different show.
What I might like consider trying one week. I don't know if Justin's gonna like it, but what I might consider trying one week is how we have the link, we have our title that we give to the story, and then we have our summary, is that we actually write out exactly what we want to say for the headline.
That's what I did today, but
in the summary. And then we can react to it and we can expand on it if there are questions, but plan exactly what the headline is. Because I think that's the problem that I run into, is I like to kind of craft a story and figure out a cool angle and all this kind of stuff. But a headline is a very different thing. So if I can kind of plan out exactly what I want to say and how I want to say it succinctly ahead of time, I think it might make it feel tighter.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't think it necessarily has to be, tight. And I think like people in the chat are saying, there is a certain, what was the comment in there? So who put it in there? Noodles, let the show flow like a flying snake. Yeah. And I think, there is a certain amount of that letting us have our back and forth that is important. But yeah, I think there is also, is there an alarm bell for, hey, a story is dragging on too long and it's time to wrap it up? I mean, I can sit over here and be like, but nobody's listening to me.
Nope. And well, also, if the person talking is looking at notes, then they might not see you do that.
They might not. Exactly. Yeah, Anthony Becerra in YouTube is saying 90 minutes of science is fine. And yeah, I mean, I think 90 minutes is a good
Mhm.
good show time to aim for.
Yeah,
I think when
that's a good aiming.
we do 2 hours pretty easily, but I think 2 hours might be
Mm-hmm. It's a lot.
long. It's a
Mhm.
lot for people to listen to. But I think, you know, maybe if people are seeing the quick stories at the top, maybe more people will watch on YouTube. The quick stories at the top might lead to more people watching longer if the interview or their favorite segment is after, or listening longer. I don't know. Gaurav likes TWIS specifically because it's long. H&EK, yes, you missed my computer reboot twice. Once during the show and once after. Once it was while Justin was talking, though, so I was able to slide on out of my chair and fix my microphone. I see, Gaurav, it's great for doing dishes and cooking and cleaning. That's right, it's the conversational show. Yes. Ed likes more conversation over more stories. Yeah, I mean, I think it's you know, yeah. Multiple audio releases. Yes, Thunder Beaver, that was an idea that I discussed, but I haven't done it. I think what I need to do is hire somebody to work with me as an editor. If we were to do multiple releases, you know, like, release the TWIS questions as a segment, or if we were to release Blair's Animal Corner as its own segment, or, you know, we've got the long podcast. I could take interviews and have them released separately. Yeah, TWIS bits. Exactly. Little things, small segments for easy digestion. Yes. I've thought about doing that. But it's like it's just, there's the activation energy to you know, I need a catalyst to make some things happen. Another
When I was
idea has
working
been
from home, I was doing mini episodes every
were great.
week. But now I'm working 9 and 10-hour days at work, so
and now
they
you're
are back in the
tired.
toilet. We'll see. In the fall, I might be back working at home again, and if that's the case, then I can start doing stuff again.
That would be nice. Thunder Beaver. Each segment could be a little longer, 10 to 30 minutes per segment. Yeah. And then we could record once a week, but then release smaller bits daily.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Noodles is like, just let it flow. Stop trying to tell it what to do. Stop trying to tell TWIS who to be when it grows up. Yeah, it's good. It's good. Oh man, Gaurav, there are probably so many bloopers. Oh my God. Yeah.
How about just every time Justin tries to pronounce someone's name?
I know, just a reel of him mispronouncing things.
I love that. We need to make that happen.
Oh my God.
I feel like it needs to be a video too, because his face is like half of it.
I know.
His mouth moves a lot when he's trying to say the names.
Oh my God. Thunder Beaver, a short, near daily thing that's set up for people's smart devices, 5 to 10 minutes max.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was working on. But...
Yeah. Identity 4. It all has to be slowed down so Justin sounds drunk. I think some of them he probably was already drunk. Yeah, and I keep trying to get Kai to do something. He was excited for 5 minutes, but I think he really likes just coming and being on TWIS as opposed to trying to do his
Making
own show.
thing.
Yeah.
Right. I think I'm dying. I feel
Harry,
bad.
don't die. I like you here.
Yeah.
Be
I have to
okay.
retire. I'm a wilting flower. I have to go.
Oh, rehydrate yourself. Get your sleep. Maintain your health so you can keep your immune system up and not get sick again.
Yeah, I also have to handle my stress.
Handle your stress. Handle it.
It would be helpful if the parents of children who attend camp would wear their mask when they drop off their child. That would be great. I've had to get in some confrontations. It's pretty frustrating. Anyway.
If anybody knows children, parents with children who are going to the San Francisco Zoo for summer camp, tell them to wear their masks. We are asking you. Blair is asking you
Please.
for her own health and safety.
Yeah.
And the health and safety of others.
Yeah.
Please. Let's see. You need to go. Justin's already gone. Yeah, Thunder Beaver. Kai could come in, do his own segment. Yeah, maybe have his own show later. We'll see. He just wants to do gaming on Twitch. Have a YouTube channel where he can be like Dan TDM.
Well,
Anyway,
there's certainly a market for that.
there is. I need to write something for the newsletter. That's what I need to do.
So does Justin. Justin said he was gonna.
Yeah, so okay, I will poke on these things for newsletter. We will try and get some time together to talk about all of these show things and thoughts and ideas. And thank you, everybody, for being with us for another episode. I'm also trying to get some interviews lined up for the next few weeks. Yes.
Fun.
I might have one for next week. I'm not sure. Got to confirm. I hadn't confirmed yet, so I couldn't put it in. But it's somebody who works on CRISPR with Jennifer Doudna at UC Berkeley.
Nice.
Yeah, so that could be a fun interview. CRISPR and COVID. Yeah. Moving into the future. I got a physicist lined up possibly. Oh, and I think we're going to be talking about lemurs sometime in the near future.
Oh gosh. Okay. Yeah, give me a warning before that happens.
Yeah, you're gonna be so excited. Hold on, let me.
Love lemurs, as people sometimes call them.
Yes. Lemurs.
Excuse me. Where are the lemurs?
The lemurs. Oh, we have a month. August 5th.
Okay.
August 5th, we are
I'll set an alarm for
talking.
myself.
Yes. Yeah. Talking about lemurs with someone from the Duke Lemur Center.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. That's August 5th. It'll be good. If anybody has ideas for interviews, people you want to hear from, send me an email. Send us questions for This Week in Science questions. And say goodnight, Blair.
Good night, Blair. Say good night, Kiki.
Good night, Kiki. Good night, everyone. Thank you once again. It's been so much fun. I hope you enjoyed the show, and I hope that we will see you again next week. Thank you for joining us. Good night.